All right, guys. So I'm just going to read what Dr. Young has given us, and then we'll just talk through after that. So this is a simulation from a teacher that is going to take an administrative position. This was his first job as a principal. He had been a teacher for several years and had obtained his master's degree in educational administration the preceding summer. Last spring, he had looked around for a position in administration, but nothing seemed to be available for someone with no previous administrative experience. During the summer, he had gradually accepted the idea of another year of teaching, but in mid-August, he had received a call from the superintendent of a small district that was looking for a building principal. The former principal had just resigned to take a job in a larger school system, and since classes were scheduled to begin in 2 weeks, the superintendent was anxious to hire someone to fill the vacancy. Within a few days, after several telephone conversations and a personal interview, the superintendent had offered him the job. Although the offer had been rather flattering, he had experienced mixed emotions about accepting it. It had bothered him a little to think that requesting a release from his own school district so late in the year, although he had been fairly sure that there would be no problem in obtaining it. He had also had reservations about working in such a small school system and community. Still, he had realized that a person had to start somewhere, and this job would at least provide him with experience. So with that thought in mind, he had accepted the position. His decision had precipitated the need for numerous other decisions within the next week and a half. Such matters as putting his home up for sale and locating suitable housing for his family in the new community had to be taken care of. And before he knew it, the time that he had hoped to spend learning about the educational program of the district and planning for the opening of the school had almost dwindled away. Now, with only 2 days left before the faculty was to return for its annual fall workshop, the principal began to panic a little. He still hadn't come to a decision about which items should be covered during the 2-day teacher workshop, and he was beginning to become concerned about how teachers would react to him as their new principal. Several of them had stopped by the previous day, but it was difficult to tell how they felt. He suspected that he was younger than many of the faculty members, and he had misgivings about how the older and more experienced teachers might perceive him. He had also started to experience some uncertainty about how well the students and their parents were going to accept him. Although he had gotten along all right with both groups while as a teacher, he wasn't sure how they would respond to him, or wasn't sure they would respond to him the same way now that he's a principal. He wondered whether he was ready for all the responsibilities that principal had to handle. He recalled that in the past he had never been especially awed by the principal's duties, but from this new perspective, things seemed to look a lot different. So the question we have to answer here is, if the principal had taken sufficient time, so if he didn't have all that other stuff going on, what specific aspects of the educational programs of the district should have been investigated, and what plans should he have made for the teacher workshop and the opening of the school? So before we answer the question, let's just make some observations from what we read.
I think that he was not confident in his ability as an administrator.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he was excited about it, but once it got pretty close to it, he started questioning who liked him, who didn't like him. Was he good enough? Was he going to know what to do? Type deal.
I just think with him not being confident in his abilities, just due to the lack of preparation, not having enough time, or not giving and setting enough time for him to get prepared to be ready for the teachers when they came back.
Yeah, I think going into a job with 2 weeks, 2 weeks before it's supposed to start, and never had done it before, probably. I don't know if I would have taken that. Just if I had a lot of experience, it'd be easy to kind of jump into that. But I think that's tough for somebody like that to do.
Especially when he thought he wanted to become an administrator at some point, but you got to, like you said, start somewhere.
Yeah, you do. I don't know if that's where it needs to be, but yeah, you do have to start somewhere. As far as, I guess, that inexperience, the one thing that he's unsure of is school policies. Yeah. He don't really know how they do things, and one thing that principal is supposed to do is, or one thing you should do when you go in is, you want to know kind of their traditions and histories, and you want to keep some things, the same. So understanding policies is something that's real big that I think he might want to know, before stepping in.
Definitely, you need to be familiar with the school improvement needs. I'm working at an elementary school. We're constantly revising and looking at how we can make our school better. So I think that would be a concern of his, to how he can improve the school from his like where he's at,
Right.
2 weeks in,
Right.
like right there.
Well, and two, just with the lack of preparation that he had, he doesn't know the achievement gap. He doesn't know what he's got to actually do to make all the kids in his school successful,
Right.
and what ways it's going to help them be successful.
Yeah, if you don't know what problems they have, you really don't know what to do to fix it. So
That's
I mean,
right.
If you just jump in, you could just be, doing the same things they've been doing, and really can't make any changes that way. School climate. I mean, how are the students? What do they feel about their school day? What kind of resources do they have? Are your teachers happy? What's the morale? You don't know that. So that's the thing that needs to be checked as well.
I would almost do like an icebreaker type deal when I came for open, like that first 2 days in there. I would kind of do something to get to know your faculty and staff, but you don't know the different stuff that's in place, the policies and stuff, but you still need to create that rapport with your staff, just to
Right.
let them know that, hey, we're all in this together. I know I just started, but we're going to be on the same page.
Well, and, I know he's very concerned about getting his family moved and stuff, but in those last couple of days, I probably would have, if I was in his shoes, found some way to create some kind of workshop to get to know my teachers over the summer.
Right.
That way I know who I can count on and what I can, who I can use
Yeah.
to help me make my first year as an administrator successful.
Yeah, using that workshop obviously to take care of or figuring out your goals and making plans for improvement. But if you don't know anybody, you really haven't had time to get to know anybody, you're gonna have to use part of that time to do that. And he's got to understand too. He's got misgivings, I guess, about how they're going to feel about him. I mean, they're probably thinking the same thing because they don't know this guy from Adam either. So, he's worried about whether they'll like him. They're probably worried about whether or not he's going to like them or fire him. So that's good right there. What kind of what would you recommend? What would you recommend if he were to come to you and say, "Hey, I'm about to do this. Do you have any thoughts for me?"
I definitely think, like one of the articles said, to seek out the best preparation that you can find.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably make a phone call to somebody that I know that's a principal, that could just lead me and just, whether it be take a deep breath, whether it be go in guns blazing,
Right.
like some kind of advice from somebody who's already been in that shoes.
Yeah, we I would say look for a mentor. I mean, we all have teachers and administrators and all that we look up to and how they do things, how they run things. I'm sure he has a friend, if he's been in education for 8+ years, that he can call and say, hey, look, I've taken this job. What do you do? How do you do it? And then, seek advice from people that he knows is successful. I mean, that's the great thing about being a teacher is you're not on an island like everybody thinks you are. You have resources and people that you can use to help you be successful as well.
Your article says something about finding a mentor. What does it say?
Yeah, it says being a principal can be a lonely place. If you're in a smaller elementary school, you may not have an assistant principal in that case. You may be the only one. In addition to tapping your PON, be sure to find other administrators in your district or outside your area to be there when you have a critical question or simply need to vent. A former superintendent and principal of mine were a lifesaver for me in my early years. I can look back now, just relating to this article, I have great people that I work with that were in administration that I could call, and they were very successful at it, that they'd be willing and grateful to help me along that road if I was going to be an administrator.
Yeah, I think that's important for, no matter what you do. You need to have somebody that you can turn to ask for advice or vent to, like we said already. So yeah, finding a mentor, I think that's the first thing he should do, especially with no experience. Establishing have your mentor, but you also go into a new place with not that much time. He's got to figure out
Who you can count on.
who he can count on. So establishing some kind of advisory council, or somebody that can come in and say, all right, Mr. So and so, this is what we have done. I know that's the most dangerous thing. That's something that can be said when you go into a new place. Well, this is the way we have done things. But at least knowing that can kind of identify problems or things that are good for the school. So it's okay to have that. So some kind of council of guys that can kind of guide him and this is what we have been doing. This is maybe some ideas, people to bounce things off of. Because if you're not from the community,
Yep.
there's a lot of things that the community won't accept. So you got to have those folks that are from wherever you're going. To help
I
you
think
out,
at a middle school or a high school level, you can have the type of people who are department heads and stuff like that, and that you can kind of form your team from that. And as
Right.
far as the elementary level, you just kind of got to see what's worked in the past and who you can count on and who's a great teacher. But definitely at the middle school and high school level, you have an English lead, you have a math lead, and so that would be who I would look for as my counsel and like my team
Right.
going into the new year.
Well, and, you know, of course, if you have the time, I have two. I'm not going to read all of it to y'all out of my article that I saw that fits great to this. Communicating well with your staff and community, and identifying the major players and support them. I mean, you got to have community involvement. I mean, it's not just about what's going on inside the school; it's about what's going on outside as well.
Right.
So I would say having somebody outside the school, some of the parents involved in that advisory council, and then I would say finding the people that you know you can count on in the school, whether it's some of your veteran teachers or maybe even some of your newer teachers, and putting them on that council. So that way that you get a difference of opinion and you just don't get people that agree on one thing.
Right. I like that too, and I think we've said it already. Honor the history of your school. So that article has pretty much everything in it that you need. What about an SIP team? You know, obviously we're looking for a way to improve. That's the whole purpose of standardized tests and everything else, is to measure what's going on and figure out what you need to do to develop it. So, you know, probably one of the first things he should do is develop that team that knows its students and it knows how to take that data and put it in ways that it needs to be, so that, you know, they can figure out what they need to do to improve.
The elementary school that I work at, our school improvement team is made up of our principal, a PE teacher, a parent, grandma, just people in the community, somebody in the hospital. So like he said, our improvement team, he should try to find the most important people that he
Right.
can in a short amount of time, and then create one goal.
That's the first thing that he should really do. I mean, with no time, I think with no time, the first thing I would try to figure out is who the student improvement team was already already in place, and get them together and find out what the data says for that school, to start working that. And then, you know, you can build off of that to go to, you know, when you start talking about he didn't really have anything planned for his workshop, you know, he could get that out of the way, know what they need to work on, and then, you know, build a workshop on that stuff later. And climate.
Go ahead.
Climate. So we talked about that a second ago. He's got to do something to analyze the school climate. We talked about him not knowing it, needing to know it. What are some ways that you recommend of him doing that with such short notice without knowing anybody?
In this article, it talked about effective principals ensure that their schools, both adults and children, are on the same page.
Right.
So their teachers and their students are all on the same page. And when you do that and you create that in your school, then when you send stuff home to mom and daddy is going to be on the same page, because they know that you're on the same page with their child. And then it just talked about engaging the parents in the community. Have events at your school that the parents can come to and they can see how their child is progressing, but they also can be involved as well.
Right.
And then tell them to learn how to say no. Drop their kid off and come and hang out, but you also need to trust who's in place, the teacher and the administration at that school. So that's just, this article talked about creating a climate with everybody involved, parents, teachers, students, everybody.
I like what you said about parents, and it's just going back to the same article. This is a great article that I found. It includes a lot of great stuff. Talked about having events and stuff, utilizing the internet. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet, but the internet can be used as a great tool. Putting stuff about the school on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, sharing stuff on the website. You know, seeing the kids doing the great things at that school. And the biggest thing that I take from this article that I really take into my professional career as well is just spending time with the students, talking with the students, not necessarily in a very structured, just in the hallway, or, you know, if they're outside shooting hoops or in the gym shooting hoops, you know, going in there and just spending a little bit of time with them, just asking them what they think, how they feel, what do they think could change to help them be more successful as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned technology, you know, not only to put out information of what's going on, but I think that's, you know, probably be this guy's best bet is to use that technology to actually go ahead and get an idea of what it is. So, I mean, he can use things like surveys to go ahead and send out. I mean, everybody, you know, now in most schools, it's a lot of technology and blended learning. So send a survey out, you know, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm the new principal here. Please take a few minutes, fill out this survey, and just have those questions kind of, letting me know what you think about the school and what's going on and your hopes for the year, and that way he can kind of gauge, and then he can kind of make some decisions off of that.
I think he should definitely take this year and write down as much and absorb as much as he can,
Right.
and compare it to the year that he wasn't there. And so when he starts the next year, he'll be ready to go with 2 years
Right.
worth of data, one that he did and then one that was there before.
Right. I guess now we can talk about workshops. So obviously that's the big thing. Like by the time he gets moved into this place, he's got 2 days, and his teachers are coming to school, and teachers, not very many teachers are really excited about getting up and going to pre-planning, right? So when they get there, you better have something for them to do, or they're going to complain. You're going to lose them. So, I found an article on designing a workshop, and basically, as with anything, he's got to establish goals. And again, he can use those teams to help him with that. But he ought to have in mind. I mean, he's worked places before, so he kind of knows what needs to go on. But he needs to establish these goals. This article talks about setting these goals. Number one, set a variety of types of goals. What do you plan to accomplish? All right, so let's get that out of the way. What participants, what will they leave the workshop with? Is it going to be a revised set of goals? Is it going to be a new detailed outline for classroom activities? Like we have in place what they're going to leave with. In what ways might you change their level of knowledge or attitude? So, you can use that information from the data from the climate surveys, from your advisory council, from your SIP team to know what's already going on. If you want something to change, it's gotta be implemented day one. So we can work on stuff like that, and use those goals. It says use them to plan your workshop evaluations. If you're trying to, if you're identifying a need of a large gap in student achievement from special ed or low socioeconomic students, then your workshop needs to be geared towards helping your teachers identify those children, number one, learning how to read the data that they're getting, right, and then coming up with some kind of plan. So it needs to be activities there of teaching them how to read their assessment data. Well, I guess you can back up a step and make sure they're assessing the correct way and not just giving a test to give a grade. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree with you 100%. And when you're doing the workshop, it doesn't need to be a workshop where you bring somebody in and and your teachers have to sit there hours upon hours listening to somebody talk. It needs to be something where they're engaged in it.
Right.
They're actually doing something. They're
right.
staying busy. They're staying occupied. Because just like students, we get bored too.
Yep.
So, and once we get bored, we're just like the students. We tune it out and then we go to focus on other things.
Right.
I think it's really important to make it fun and upbeat, especially coming in as a new guy. To keep your teachers engaged in what you have planned for the school.
I also use, like you said, technology. There's other workshops out there that you can, one, send your teachers to, but two, you can kind of piggyback the ideas that other workshops have and then see what they provided. And whether he wants to or not, but maybe something on that Saturday or the next Saturday after he's had a couple weeks in, that'd be a good time. Not call it a workshop, but you can just say it's like a family kind of get together, bring your staff and your kids, but in the same sense, like the kids can be learning and the teachers are getting new information about this guy and kind of getting all on the same page.
Right. Basically, he just needs to survive. We were in our new teacher stuff the other day, with those guys, and as the mentor teacher sitting there with them, somebody was giving a presentation. They were like, guys, if this is your first year ever teaching, like your goal needs to be to survive. Like survive and come back next year. So obviously he's got years of experience, but this is going to be completely different for him because he's a principal. So really,
Year one all
he's
over
just got to survive and use and take every day and what he learned from the previous and and just keep adjusting goals and making plans and keep talking to people that's done it before. He don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, it's been done for all these years. So talk to folks and just keep chugging along. I always say fake it till you make it.
That's right. Well, and again, my article is a great article. Something about setting goals. You don't want to set a bunch of goals in your first year because you're not going to meet them.
Right.
I mean, you need to find one important goal that you want to meet that first year, and that's your goal for that year. And then after your first year, after you're taking your notes on that year, then you start setting more goals per year. I have a great coaching friend. I know that his sports team, they keep journals. I'd keep a journal of my everyday events of what's going on in my school, and just make sure that I have a reference of what's going on, how did I handle it, or what do I need to improve on.
Right.
So,
Anything else?
I think that's good.
This concludes our presentation.
Thank you.